Today, we're gonna be talking about my Grizzly table saw. Now, you need to know, I've had this table saw in my shop for 5 years. It is the first table saw that I have ever purchased. Now, I'm gonna share with you 3 things that I absolutely love about Grizzly table saws and 3 things that I just find very frustrating that you need to know about. At the end of the video, I'm gonna share with you my thoughts on when you should buy a Grizzly table saw and when you should buy a Sawstop saw. If you want to know what the first 3 things are that I love about it, stick around because we're about to discuss them. All right, so there's 3 things that I absolutely love about this table saw, and the very first thing is this fence. It is a great fence, it's a solid fence, and it has worked every time I've used it. If you're looking for a table saw, make sure that that table saw has a solid fence. You don't want it to move, you want it to lock down and not move at all. That's very important when you're cutting your material and you want to have that precision. Okay, so the second thing that I absolutely loved about this was that this table saw is a 5 horsepower motor inside of it, and it's a 240 volt. Now that's important to me because I didn't want my motor or my blade to ever bog down or feel like when I was pushing something through it, it was having a hard time. Now I think that's important because this is my opinion, is I want more power when I'm pushing something through, and I believe like the more power you have, the less kickback has the potential of happening when you're pushing something straight through. Now that's my opinion. You still can have kickback happen, but I didn't want my motor's power to be in that equation, if that makes sense. So, and when you cut walnut and maple, if you want to get into that, you need a very powerful motor because those are very hard materials, and I've never had an issue with this saw cutting through those materials. All right, so the third thing that I really liked about this table saw was the price. You know, when I bought this 5 years ago, I want to say it was around $1,400, somewhere around there, and I wanted a cabinet saw, I wanted a solid fence, and I wanted a 5 horsepower motor. Those are things that you would only get in more expensive machines. In addition, I really wanted to have a router table on the end of my table saw. At the time, I thought, oh, I'm just gonna hook my router up to it, I'm gonna use it, it'll be great. The real truth is, I've never used it once. So don't buy this if you want to have the router table capabilities. More than likely, you're not gonna use it. I actually have a router table and I use that because it's specialized. So don't buy this model if you want to have just a router option. You probably won't ever use it. I never have in the 5 years I've owned it. Okay, well now let's talk about the 3 things that really just frustrate me about this model and Grizzly. The thing that I don't like is when I bought this table saw, the tools that they gave me to change out the blade are just stamped steel. You can see it right here, it's super thin, and the wrench that they gave me would bend. I actually called the company and said, hey, when I put my wrench in and I try and tighten everything, the little teeth on it just warped and I can't get my blade off. And like, oh, that might be a stamping issue. We'll send you a brand new one. Their customer service, however, is amazing. Like Grizzly's service, I've had no issues with them. They're phenomenal. However, the stamped tools that they give you to change out the blade are garbage. You might as well just throw them out. I ended up ordering my own cast version of the wrench that I needed, and I had to grind down the steel to actually fit in between, and I used this cheap little thing just to hold the nut while I twist everything. So this is probably the biggest disappointment about the tool is that they just don't give you the right tools to really change your blade out. And I change mine out quite often because I'm going from a single blade to a dado stacked blade. But if you're never really gonna change it out that often, it might not be that big of a deal to you. All right, well, let's talk about the second thing that just frustrates me about the table saw. Now that's its dust collection system in the base. Now this might just be me and maybe my slab of concrete that it's sitting on isn't perfectly angled, but like for some reason I have a whole Grizzly dust collecting system right off to the side over here. You can see it right there. And I hook it up. Yes, it does suck up the dust, but for some reason, the the sawdust that's in the cabinet just doesn't funnel in correctly. There's a hose that connects to the saw that's up there. It gets in the way, even though they have some things in there that'll pull it out of the way. I just think they could do a better job designing how the dust filters down through the back port to be sucked out through the dust collecting system. Now again, this just may be me, but I have tried all sorts of things to try and get the dust out, and I get frustrated by it. I have to manually get in there and scoop it out every couple of weeks, and it's just annoying. So if you guys have any suggestions on tips or tricks and have this model and know a way to improve that, let me know. I really would like to know, so post those in the comments. Okay, so let's talk about the third thing that just kind of frustrates me about this table saw. And honestly, it's a minor one, but it's overall design. I think the way that they have the mechanics inside the motor, you know, to put in your riveting knife, to change your blade out, just some things I've noticed as I've gotten internal and looked inside of it, it just feels like they could do some better engineering around this. Now, I don't have a Sawstop and I haven't looked at one, but from what I've read, the mechanics and the engineering behind it is way better than a Grizzly. Now, I'm just telling you from my experience, it works, it's fine. I think this that they give you for your blade is solid, it's metal. I've actually have a 0 tolerance one, so that way it kind of keeps all that dust in there, but when you turn your blade at 90 or 45 degrees, you need to swap out for the one that they gave you. So I do have a few things that I've upgraded. One thing that I would recommend doing, it doesn't have the safety features that a Sawstop would have. You know, that is important. However, over 5 years, I've only had one kickback, and that's probably one of the most dangerous things that you can have, other than having an injury to your fingers. But I use these by Microjig. I really love their tools. This is a grip block. So whenever I'm pushing flat material through, I use this and I push it through. I really like Microjig's safety tools that they provide. So really, safety was important to me, but I have just invested in other products to offset the cost. So, you know, you can do two things. You can buy a Grizzly table at a cheaper rate. You know, this is like 14, I think it's around 16 or 1700 right now. I'll put a link to that in the description. However, you could buy this, save yourself a lot of money, and then buy things like a shop block or this is called a grip rip block, and they make many other things that help with safety in pushing your material through. And that's the route that I chose. I chose that because at the time, I couldn't afford the Sawstops that were on the market at the time. They only had one model and it was very expensive. It was like $4,000, where this was like $14,000. And I decided to invest in other tools that would help with safety, such as the tools that Microjig makes. In addition to that, you know, that's a little bit of a downfall. A little reason why I may not like it is it doesn't have those safety features, but I've compensated with it by investing in some of those other tools. Okay? All right, so here we are at the final question. Should you buy a Grizzly table or should you invest in a Sawstop? Now, this comes down to understanding really what you're planning on using your table saw for. I get this question a lot on my channel, and a lot in my own personal life. People come to me and say, Philip, what should I buy? And here's my opinion. If you want to have a table saw in your shop and you need to cut things every once in a while, maybe it might be on the weekends every so often, once or twice a month, or every month, you're infrequent with your use of it, buy a Grizzly table. It's cheap, it's affordable, and just invest in tools that Microjig makes to protect yourself and have that safety. And I could not tell you, go buy a Sawstop if you're using it, once a week, maybe 30 minutes or, once a month. It's just not worth the investment if you're gonna go buy a Sawstop. Just spend your money elsewhere and buy some of the tools and just get a table saw, a good solid one, and I'll put a link to the one that I would recommend in the description. However, if you're really wanting to get into the woodworking business, you're wanting to start your own woodworking business, or you're really wanting to dive into this and make it your hobby, buy a Sawstop. Make the investment up front. You know, you don't need a cabinet version like this. This is called a cabinet. That's because it has this down below. You can get their contractor version. It has a great fence. The price point is really good. And I'll put a link to that one in the description as well. But if you want to really start this as a woodworking business and you are doing it yourself and you see yourself having employees down into the future, buy a Sawstop. The reason why is it does have those safety features. It's very well made. They advertise that they're made here in America, although I think some of their parts may not be, but I'll have to check that out. But buy a Sawstop. So to conclude, here we are at the end. I hope we answered your questions. The 3 things that I really love about it, let's recap, are the fence, the 5 horsepower motor, and the fact that it's a good price for the size of the table. The 3 things that I don't like about it are the tools that they give you to change out your blade, the dust collection system that's in there, and how the dust flows, and the fact that it doesn't have the safety features that a Sawstop would have. All right? Now, at the end of the day, the purchase decision, really, you need to ask yourself, how do you intend to use it? If you're gonna be an infrequent user, buy a Grizzly. They're a great system. I haven't had any issues with this, and I'm gonna continue using this. I'm even having a hard time, and I do this as a side business and a part-time business, and I do want a Sawstop, but I have a hard time spending $4,000 or $5,000, unless Sawstop, you wanna send me one. Now, for this, go with the Grizzly. Now, if you are a business starting out and you have funds to do this, go with a Sawstop. Make that investment right away. You don't have to have the cabinet version. You can get the contractor version and you'll have those safety features. And it's a great saw. All right? Well, I hope you liked it. If you did, smash that thumbs up button for me. And if you have any questions or comments about this review and my thoughts on the table saw, please post them below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. All right, guys, till the next one. I'll see you later.